In part one of this series, I mentioned what I personally believe to be, at least potentially, the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. In this episode, we're going to explain that discovery, and I'll explain exactly why I believe it to be so significant. Essentially, it's because it ties directly to the Great Pyramid itself, and to chambers within the pyramid that no one has ever seen before. Very few people even know that they exist. But in this episode, we're going to show you exactly what they look like, and we'll even show you how they're accessed. I believe these chambers could contain extremely advanced artifacts, including technology and records of human history, that could utterly transform our way of life on this planet. Ultimately, I believe these records could actually teach us who we truly are and where we came from. They could provide a collective level of self-awareness for the entire human race, so their importance can't possibly be overstated. Beyond all that, I believe it's very likely we could lose all of these artifacts forever if we don't recognize their importance today. We know that the Ministry of Antiquities has very often kept things covered up and secret, and they haven't revealed some of the most important artifacts in Egypt to the public. We have to protect these things, or the same thing could happen to the chambers of the Great Pyramid. This is why I believe they're the most important chambers we could possibly discover in the entire land of Egypt. They're central to everything. And in order to fully understand how important they are, we need to understand the significance of the Great Pyramid itself. After researching pyramid cultures all over the world for many years, I've become very convinced that they are all part of one singular project. They're all essentially part of one giant machine that spans the whole planet. And they're all indicating the importance and central focus of the Great Pyramid of Giza as being the keystone of the whole thing. They're all pointing us back to Giza. All of these pyramids are methodically laid out on an icosahedron grid that wraps around the entire planet. These are all what we call ley lines, and energy moves along these lines through the surface of the Earth. Where they all intersect are nodes or points on which pyramids are always built. This is a natural energy grid that functions almost like a nervous system for the whole planet, and the pyramids balance and amplify it. This has long been known and proven. The pyramids harvest, store, and wirelessly transmit this energy from the Earth. Like a prism, it refracts the energy into our environment. So it has a sort of mechanical function within this great machine, and the energy it holds can be used to heal individuals and whole ecosystems from sickness, poisons, toxins, and practically anything harmful to living beings. Research on pyramid power has proven this beyond dispute, especially the work of the Russian scientist Alexander Golod. Yet, the Great Pyramid also has many other functions, including the storing of records. Not only does it very likely contain important records within it, but the structure itself encodes a vast system of science and mathematics within its own dimensions and shape. It describes our planet's shape and size as well as its rotational speed. It shows us pi, phi, the Pythagorean theorem, the 360-degree circle, the squaring of the circle, the flower of life, and it even shows the speed of light in a vacuum in many different ways. It uses units of measure that we still use today, not just the cubit, but also the meter, foot, mile, second, minute, and hour. Most all this information is encrypted within the structure of the pyramid itself, including its size, shape, and location. So by the placement of 5 points in space, the 4 base corners and the apex, we have an entire science that can be reverse engineered from this monument. There's a long list of evidence to prove that this knowledge was intentionally encoded into the architecture, and they would always repeat the message over and over to ensure that it's understood and not a coincidence, as it's so often called. We're told most of these concepts didn't come around until later ages from Pythagoras and others, but the truth is they all learned it from the pyramid, which appears to have come from a time at least 6,000 years before our written history began. We can't presently explain all of that evidence in this film, but if you read the works of R.A. Schwaller de Lubix and John Anthony West, you'll understand that this entire sacred science is encrypted into an architectural language used at every temple and pyramid, and it extends far beyond just math and geometry. It also shows a mastery over biology, astronomy, physics, and much more. Secrets of the Great Pyramid by Peter Tompkins is another great resource on this subject, and The Giza Prophecy by Gary Osborne and Scott Creighton also has some very interesting revelations about the pyramid. For example, they show that the pyramid demonstrates awareness of the obliquity of Earth's axis at approximately 23.5 degrees, and it also actually pinpoints its own position on the Earth's surface, almost exactly on the 30th parallel, which places it exactly 1/3 of the way from the equator to the pole. This also means that it's the same distance from the North Pole as it is from the center of the Earth's core. To call all of this coincidence is inexcusable. It's just bad science. If the evidence contradicts your hypothesis, you have to adjust your theory, not just ignore or throw out the pieces you can't account for. The Great Pyramid is also located at the geographic center of all of Earth's landmasses. This is why it was considered the ancient prime meridian. So we have to realize the pyramid has a global significance. It's the answer to a riddle that affects everyone on Earth, and it's an heirloom that belongs to the whole human race. So we know that everything about it speaks of the most important and universal of scientific and mathematical concepts. And we can expect that the written records it contains would be of an equivalent value and complexity. It could easily be concluded that those who built this structure had a greater knowledge of the natural universe than we have today. So potentially we have much to learn from this discovery. As Casey told us, the Great Pyramid is far older than dynastic Egypt, and the date he gives perfectly coincides with a completely different technique, the astrological dating used by John Anthony West, Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, and many others. They pinpoint the origin of Giza to be potentially around 10,500 BC, which was the dawn of the Age of Leo. So these two completely separate sources both indicate this pinpointed date of 10,500 BC, the dawn of the Age of Leo, as being a time when much of the plateau was constructed. There are surely parts that go back far earlier than that, and there were many parts that were added on later, but essentially that's when the Giza Plateau was likely created. Of course, Dr. Robert Schoch's geological dating of the Sphinx also puts it back into the same early period, if not earlier. There's no definitive evidence that Khufu or Khafra built the pyramids, but a great deal suggesting that they are far older, and even that when they were built in the first time, they were placed on top of older sacred mounds. So this mound under the Great Pyramid and whatever was underground within it could be tens of thousands of years old. Casey describes those coming to Egypt over 12,000 years ago as archaeologists themselves, seeking out these already ancient mounds and sacred sites. This corresponds well with the wall inscriptions at Edfu as well, and also with Solon and Plato's description of Atlantis, which also came from Egypt. We even have a depiction of the three pyramids and the Nile on an ostrich egg from nearly 2,000 years before Khufu's time. So it's pretty safe to say that the pyramids themselves were at least 12,500 years old rather than 4,500 years old. And this is why in part 1 Bill said that Khufu's work and Hemiuno, his architect's work at the pyramids, were really the renovation of those structures and not their original construction. What we're most interested in at Giza are the parts that go back to this very remote era, which the Egyptians called Zep-Tepi, or the first time. And they describe that the gods ruled directly in Egypt at this time, before they disappeared and were replaced by the Shemsu Hor, or the companions of Horus, which were the offspring of gods and man. This is the very same idea as the Sumerian Anunnaki and their human offspring called the Nephilim. And if we look at the book of Enoch, we find these same beings called the Watchers. So if we're putting the pieces together here, we can probably figure out where this is all leading. The major discovery that we're bringing forward has two parts to it. The first part was discovered by an independent Italian team, and it was announced last year. But the second part was discovered by Bill Brown and has never been revealed until today. The interior structures of the Great Pyramid that we know about include the descending corridor leading to the subterranean chamber and the ascending corridor leading to the so-called Queen and King's chambers. In recent years, however, there have been two teams that have tried to definitively determine if there are any other chambers within the pyramid. The Scanned Pyramids team has been working at Giza since 2016, and they've been using multiple methods to attempt to map out the interior area of the Great Pyramid and see if there are additional voids. The main method they use is called muography. And muons are cosmic particles that are constantly bombarding the Earth from outer space, and they can move through solid stone as well as through the air. But they move differently through air than they do through stone, and so by setting up sensors within the known chambers of the Great Pyramid pointing upward, they're trying to sense where there might have been air pockets within the structure, or potentially stones of a lesser density, but more than likely air pockets, meaning voids, meaning chambers that have never been entered or even known of. They didn't uncover very much. Essentially, the Scanned Pyramids team ended up telling us about two potential voids, but it didn't really define either of these voids in terms of their shape, size, or orientation. It was just a rough idea of where they might be. One was a very large chamber directly above the Grand Gallery, and potentially equivalent in size to the Grand Gallery itself, which is the largest chamber we know of in the pyramid. The other was called the North Face Corridor, which is a corridor extending into the pyramid from underneath the chevrons above the main entrance. In 2023, they actually stuck an endoscope camera underneath the chevrons and showed us the very first actual video footage within this corridor. And we can see that it goes back about 30 feet into the pyramid. It's got an arched chevron ceiling the entire length of the way. And what's really interesting is that Dr. Hawass himself announced that somewhere on the floor there is a patch of excavatable material, where there's no stone, but something that could be dug out. And obviously, if a corridor like this exists, it's leading to something. Hawass actually agreed. He said that he believed it led to additional chambers, which we could hope to access in the near future. And he was talking about months, not years. At the end of 2023, I went back to the Great Pyramid and I saw scaffolding built out in front of the chevrons, which means they're definitely working there. We don't know whether or not they've removed stones and gone inside, but if they have, it's likely that they've already reached additional chambers beyond the North Face Corridor. We haven't received any additional announcements about this since, but we have to ask, we have to wonder how far they've made it in. And if they have reached additional chambers, why haven't they announced that? Is it a covert operation? Are they covering this up like everything else? We have to wonder if the entire Scanned Pyramids project is just another example of a project to make it look like they had arrived at the final answers, but really missed the point. In 2023, there was an additional project aimed at doing the very same thing as the Scanned Pyramids team, but with a completely different technique. This one was carried out by Corrado Malanga and Phillipo Biondi, and they didn't need on-site access because they were actually scanning the pyramid from satellite. The satellites were detecting micro-movements of the Earth's crust through the Great Pyramid, whereas the Scanned Pyramids team was attempting to measure cosmic particles coming down. They were attempting to measure movements of the Earth from above. And so this ended up letting them have a much better view of some of the lower areas of the Great Pyramid, which the Scanned Pyramids team couldn't really access very well. They only had a limited number of areas where they could place these sensors in order to sense the incoming muons. What Malanga and Biondi found was absolutely incredible. they published a very thorough scientific paper on the techniques they used, and they showed their actual scans as well as the models they built from them. Their model showed us a huge volume of inner chambers that no one has ever known about, no one has ever entered. They're presumably still sealed chambers. There are 2 huge ramps coming up both sides, with passageways connected all around the King's Chamber and into the chamber that the Scan Pyramids team showed us as well, above the Grand Gallery. This is a very large chamber, and we believe this is essentially the Holy of Holies of the Great Pyramid of Giza of Egypt. It is possibly the most important chamber in the entire country. They show us that this is a rectangular chamber, and they show us its size and shape in much greater detail than the Scan Pyramids team did. This chamber likely contains very advanced technology and records of human history. This is the chamber we really want to access before anyone else can sneak in there and raid the contents. We want this chamber to be opened publicly, live on television. We want the whole world to see it. We don't want anyone accessing it before that can be made possible. They also show 2 chambers underneath the Queen's Chamber and many chambers underneath the north face of the pyramid. So essentially, after years of working on site, the Scan Pyramids team gave us very little information, whereas Malanga and Biondi gave us a wealth of information working independently from satellite. They discovered a total of 20 structures within the Great Pyramid that have never been seen before. Once again, this should have been headline news across the world, but because they were an independent team, they weren't associated with the ministry, they saw very little press. No media covered this story. If we look at the southwest corner of the pyramid, we see one of the ramps coming out at that point, and that's one of the places we can remember from part 1. Bill Brown actually did GPR scans there in 2006, and they found a chamber underneath the ground, which is almost surely connected directly to this ramp. But that's not the only potential entrance that he's discovered. The secret, once again, lies in the demolished area of the village to the east of the plateau. In part 2, we spoke about the horse stable that Bill owns in the southern part of this area, and that beneath it are 2 tombs connected by tunnels to the Sphinx. But there are many other curiosities in this area, especially toward the northern end.
Trees, greenery, shrubbery and everything. Right below that is the tunnel that goes from the village into the plateau. Those trees are still standing there because the tunnel is still active. Now, why is there greenery here and nowhere else? Okay? Because this is the underground tunnel that goes into the buildings over there. It was found in 1980. They found this tunnel underneath here, and they found 2 statues in front of the tunnel entrance, and the black market sold each one of the statues for $1 million a piece. You can see where the next area is where it's green. That's where another one of the tunnels is. And from here you can see the mosque, and where the mosque is, the steep right there, that's the underground area of Khufu's palace, about 30 meters underground. And that's one of the entrances to it. They found a whole bunch of tombs, about 20 tombs down there, and on this side of the wall they found about 30 to 50 more tombs with bodies with mummies in them. Security is right there, and that's one of the underground entrances to the tunnel system. And when we walk back, you'll see the guards. Wherever you see the guards around here, they're guarding an entrance to something. A tomb or a tunnel or whatever. They found a tomb up there. You can see the door is up there. The Russians started in 1999, and they owned all of this area. They were excavating, and they found a major tomb up here, which was, they said, was 4th dynasty, and the shafts that go straight down all connected to this tunnel system right here. I have pictures of all of that stuff. You know, before they, closed everything, we used to walk right through here. We actually went inside. I have pictures. I have movies of the inside of that stuff. And as you can see, people have knocked a hole in it here and tried to, to get in it. And this is all new mortar. Okay, I mean, it just crumbled. Okay, it just crumbled. So that's brand new. Okay, so this is an entrance to a tomb on the other side, temple on the other side.
In 2015, an article came out describing a raid that had taken place on one of the illegal excavations going on right next to the wall of the plateau. In this article, they described that one of the tunnels went directly to the Great Pyramid, and yet they claimed those who found it were imposters and they were arrested. Nevertheless, they admitted that there is a tunnel heading straight to the Great Pyramid. So why haven't we heard more of that? Why haven't we seen an official excavation take up where they left off?
You can see that the guardhouse is up there was actually monitoring, because that tunnel came right through here. People actually went down inside the shaft. I have people had a movie that went down inside. It was actually a tomb there. So right in here, you used to be able to go down inside into the tunnel. So the Egyptians came in, and you can see where they come in and dump the stuff in here. That's all new stuff, just to keep people from going in.
We have a photograph from immediately after the village was demolished, but before this entrance was covered over by mounds of building debris. We believe that this entrance is actually leading straight to the tunnel discussed in the raid from 2015 that leads directly to the Great Pyramid. Later on in 2019, there was another raid very nearby in the village. This time it was reported on local news, and they even shared video footage of some of the subterranean chambers. He says the Tourism and Antiquities Police arrested people while excavating for antiquities and discovered a crypt leading to a cemetery 4 meters underground. It may be an important discovery because it is located next to the pyramids. The suspect is being searched for. This raid took place in the northern end of the demolished area of the village, and this is exactly where the true entrance to the Great Pyramid was discovered. But before revealing this discovery, let's look at some of the context of predictions that were made about these secret chambers within the pyramid and what might be inside them. There are several literary references to at least the potential existence of hidden chambers like this in the Great Pyramid, and they all indicate the existence within those chambers of high technology and records. So we can expect that there would be extremely important artifacts to be found in these chambers. One example is called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, and this is not to be confused with the singular Emerald Tablet, which is a text that does go back at least to the 6th or 7th century AD, where it was discovered in Turkey. That was part of the original Hermetic texts, or the Corpus Hermeticum, the body of texts of Hermes, Thoth. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean is a completely different document, and it can't be proven to exist any earlier than a century ago. However, it does share some interesting information, and it has garnered a lot of attention in recent years. It was said that this text was actually stored within some of the as yet undiscovered chambers of the Great Pyramid. We have no way of knowing if that's true or not, obviously, unless we can get into those chambers. So that's one thing we could solve definitively by doing this project. This isn't a channeled text, but it's similar to a channeled text in that we have to take Doreal's word for its authenticity. These tablets were said to be inscribed on green emerald stone plates that were tied together with gold rings, and it was written in the original Atlantean language, and these were hieroglyphs essentially that interacted with one's consciousness, and they would project imagery into the mind of the observer essentially. It's mostly comprised of metaphysical codes and riddles, but there's one section of the book that everyone tends to focus on, because it states that Thoth himself buried a spaceship underneath the Giza Plateau that is waiting for the day when humanity would need it. This is what makes it such a controversial text. It says, "Raised I to light the children of Chem. Deep neath the rocks I buried my spaceship, waiting the time when man might be free. Over the spaceship erected a marker in the form of a lion yet like unto man. There neath the image rests yet my spaceship, forth to be brought when need shall arise. Know ye, O man, that far in the future invaders shall come from out of the deep. Then awake ye who have wisdom. Bring forth my ship and conquer with ease. Deep neath the image lies my secret. Search and find in the pyramid I built. Each to the other is the keystone, each the gateway that leads into life. Follow the key I leave behind me. Seek, and the doorway to life shall be thine. Seek thou in my pyramid, deep in the passage that ends in a wall. Use the key of the seven, and open to thee the pathway will fall. Now unto thee I have given my wisdom. Now unto thee I have given my way. Follow the pathway, solve thou my secrets. Unto thee I have shown the way." So this would seem to be referencing the subterranean chamber in the Great Pyramid, which I described in part 1 has a tunnel leading at the southern end of it, which I've crawled down to the end of, and it does end in a wall. As for the key of the seven, when I first read this years ago, I immediately thought this might be referencing the 7 tones of a harmonic scale, and it might be some kind of sonic or vibrational password. This was very strange because years later I came across an interview with Drunvalo Melchizedek where he describes an experience about these tablets, where he describes going into that very same passageway out of the subterranean chamber with several friends of his, and he was guided to lay down on the floor with all of them and hum these intonations in that place, which led to the experience he had there. It's very possible that the key of the 7 also has to do with the 7 chakras, and is indicating that only a person of a certain level of conscious development would be able to access these things. But it was very interesting that these details came together later on and seemed to give some validation to the entire idea. The overall tone of this passage is suggesting that there is a riddle here that we're invited to solve, and that if we can do that, we'll be given a grand prize that is ultimately priceless. So if there's any chance this text is real, it would seem to be worth our effort to at least try and solve this riddle. Unless we access these chambers inside the Great Pyramid, it's unlikely that we'll ever have definitive proof as to whether or not these texts are real. However, there are also accounts that state this text was moved from the Great Pyramid to the Yucatan, and that it was being protected by the Maya. So we have to ask, is it possible that this document is real? Is it possible that a copy of it still exists, either in the Great Pyramid or in the Yucatan? And is it possible that Thoth actually buried a spaceship under the Giza Plateau? Though this might sound completely absurd to many people, it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility, and actually, it's possible this ship has already been found. We know that in the Far East we have the Vedas, which are certainly some of the oldest texts on Earth, describing these flying ships called Vimanas. We also have what's called the Tully Papyrus, which is attributed to the age of Thutmose III, and this document has not been completely confirmed as authentic, but it does describe these fiery discs flying through the sky, which sound very much like flying saucers. We also have the biblical vision of Ezekiel that seems to describe very similar craft. So all of this is not without context. It would be much easier to make this film if we just avoided using the terms alien or Atlantis. But whether you call them Atlanteans, aliens, Anunnaki, or gods, the fact is we have thousands of their skulls that show up in every land where pyramids are found. They have elongated craniums that were not made by skull binding, and which often have 2 to 3 times the brain capacity of normal humans. It's very easy to see the difference between a bound skull and a real one. Binding can never increase the overall capacity of the brain cavity, and many of the real ones are also missing one or both of the cranial sutures. This advanced knowledge is very clearly associated with these beings who had these giant brains. So whatever name we might give them, the evidence is telling us to open our minds to the fact that civilization did not suddenly begin only 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. There was a genetically distinct race that traveled the whole world, carrying the last remnants of high wisdom from Earth's last golden age. The corrupt ones caused warfare, while the benevolent ones shared and preserved knowledge, working alongside indigenous populations. What's completely irrational about it is that no historians or universities seem to care about this subject at all, or even acknowledge it. Aside from Brian Forster, there's practically no one researching these skulls. His genetic tests, that were mostly conducted on the Peruvian skulls, determined that many of them are not Homo sapiens sapiens. In Egypt, it's perfectly clear that they were the ancestors of the later pharaohs, who still often had elongated skulls themselves. So we can't avoid the truth in plain sight. Whoever they were and wherever they came from, they were the beings who left behind these record chambers all over the world. Beyond all that, we are living in the age of disclosure on this subject, and while there's still plenty of disinformation and false leads coming out, we are also seeing the truth that governments and intelligence agencies have had knowledge of this for a long time, and they're slowly starting to admit that. So we not only have governments and intelligence agencies with this official channel of disclosure, which is harder to trust, but we also have the people power of a grassroots disclosure movement, which contains thousands of individuals all basically saying the same things about these ships and beings they've encountered. So we cannot dismiss all of this evidence. We can't just pretend it doesn't exist. In a recording intercepted by the KGB in 1960, 2 Bedouins discussed the discovery of what they called the Tomb of the Visitor. It's very interesting that 2 out of these 3 instances where Bill suggests potentially extraterrestrial mummies were found involved the Russians, because the Russians have been looking for extraterrestrial artifacts and evidence within Egypt since the Cold War. We know that they were specifically looking for extraterrestrial artifacts and technology that might be used for military applications. In fact, they were afraid that the CIA might reach some of these tombs in Egypt before they would. And this was during the Cold War, so they wanted to have military technology that could give them a leg up over the United States. The film of the excavation at the Tomb of the Visitors was discovered later in the KGB archives, and it was in the same batch of films that showed a downed UFO, where KGB agents are out in a forest analyzing this crashed flying saucer. There is a book about this, and it's called Project ISIS, the KGB's Discovery of the Tomb of the Visitor by Dr. Ivanovich. It suggests that this mummy died approximately 10 to 11,000 BC. When the sarcophagus was open, a cloud of mist escaped from inside it, and it ended up immediately making some of the men inside very sick. They had to walk out, and later only came back in with protective gear. They describe the mummy having a very large cranium, unusually large eyes, a small chin, and a long neck. They also brought in psychics to the tomb who ended up levitating when they were inside, and they explained additional energy anomalies around this tomb. They ended up doing ground scans underneath this tomb, and they did discover very deep, directly underneath it, a large disc-shaped chamber. They supposedly ended up weighing the pros and cons of trying to access that chamber, but supposedly decided to cover the entire thing up and redact any information in all the documents that give any clue as to its actual location. This entire story and the footage from inside the Tomb of the Visitor can be seen in a documentary that I've linked in the description. We don't know the exact location of the Tomb of the Visitor, but we know that it was somewhere at Giza, and we know where the Russian archaeological mission has been working for many years since then. This is what we described in part 2, when they found a dozen or more tiny alien mummies. And this is right in the area where we're looking for all these tunnels. It's central to everything. Another source that speaks of these secret chambers within the Great Pyramid and under Giza is called The Secret Places of the Lion, and it came out in 1958 by a man named George Hunt Williamson, which was also a pen name. Williamson claims that the information in this book came directly from ancient records that are preserved in Peru and protected by a school of adepts living there. It contains several passages that seem to mirror the quotes of Thoth from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, and sometimes in slightly different wording, which might indicate two separate translations of the same original, but we really don't know. In The Secret Places of the Lion, we read that the emerald tablets stored in the Great Pyramid were eventually moved to the Yucatan and were placed under the protection of Mayan priests in a temple there. This actually complements a story from Drunvalo Melchizedek, who describes those texts being in the Yucatan as well. Thoth the Atlantean aided in the building of the pyramid. The prototypes of the later inferior and smaller pyramids were copies made by the Egyptians. Thoth placed secret records and his 12 emerald tablets in the pyramid. Later, during the chaotic reign of King Horemheb, these tablets were removed and were sent to the Maya priests of Central America, who placed them beneath the altar of one of the great temples of the sun god. After the conquest of the Mayas, the cities were abandoned and the treasures of the temple forgotten. The Secret Places of the Lion claims that all of these halls of records around the world are marked with symbolism of cats, like a sphinx, and that they are all repositories, essentially, of extraterrestrial knowledge and technology. It says, near the top of the Great Pyramid, there is the most secret of chambers. It contains written records of all world civilizations, a legacy for mankind that cannot even be imagined by modern man. The builders of the Great Pyramid buried one of their great spaceships near the structure. Its power was added to that of the monumental stone pyramid. All evidence points to the fact that an advanced culture existed in Egypt thousands of years prior to the historic period of that country. It will be revealed, and no doubt within a comparatively short time now, that there are many secret chambers within the Great Pyramid, and that its true entrance lies under the silent object that is like a lion and yet like a man, the Sphinx. It will not remain silent much longer. The book goes on to describe many types of technology that were stored in these secret chambers, as well as more information about the records that were kept there. It tells us a great deal about Akhenaten, the pharaoh of the 18th dynasty in what's called the Amarna period, and his wife Nefertiti. It explains that she left Egypt after Akhenaten was killed and carried these records of his reign all the way to Tibet and Peru. It claims that there are clay tablets in Peru today that could be discovered and examined on a microscopic level To prove that the clay is native to Peru, and that these tablets were actually written in Nefertiti's own hand, suggesting she traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to preserve the story of Akhenaten. It also suggests that Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun, was able to help preserve the records of his father's reign in the chambers under the Sphinx. So we know that at least one prediction from this book is true, that there are additional chambers within the Great Pyramid. Williams' work at the plateau has also indicated that there are tunnels connecting from the Sphinx to the pyramids. If the other claims in this book are true, then not only are the record chambers real, but they were actually being accessed and added to as late as the 18th dynasty, and they were connected to other record chambers all throughout the world. This is exactly what Casey tells us also. He said there was another chamber in the Yucatan that had identical contents to the Hall of Records under Giza. Casey says, the records of the manners of construction of same are in 3 places in the earth as it stands today. In the sunken portions of Atlantis or Poseidia, where a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages of seawater, near what is known as Bimini off the coast of Florida, and the temple records that were in Egypt, where the entity later acted in cooperation with others in preserving the records that came from the land where these had been kept. Also the records that were carried to what is now Yucatan in America, where these stones, that they know so little about, are now, during the last few months, being uncovered. As a side note, we know exactly which temple Casey was speaking of in the Yucatan, and I've been making plans to visit there. It's called Piedras Negras, which means black rocks. And this is curiously similar to the original name of Egypt, which is Kemet, meaning the black land or black earth. But an earlier name for Piedras Negras was Chakmul, which means paw stone, referencing the paw of a jaguar. And so much like at Giza, it tells that the Hall of Records lies below the paw of a cat, a secret place of the lion. I had already noticed this connection before reading Secret Places of the Lion, but as its name suggests, the connection between cat symbolism and these record chambers is a major theme of the book. I already noticed many examples of this, including pumas in Peru. The city of Cusco and Sacsayhuaman are circumscribed by a giant puma geoglyph, all around the center point of the Coricancha, which is the exact location of the energy vortex on the Earth grid. As I mentioned, Williamson claims that all of this information came from a secret school of adepts living in Peru, even though it pertains to sites all over the world. So these records may have been kept very near to Cusco, where this cat symbolism is being used. In Asia, we find stone lions in sitting position guarding entrances to the royal treasuries or restricted spaces. The lion sphinx in Romania also guards a hall of records, as Radu Sinamar tells us. And the Vatican features many lions and sphinxes in its museum, and sits above perhaps the largest record chamber of all. So George Hunt Williamson really seemed to confirm that I was on the right track with this cat symbolism. These are just a couple examples of sources that share information about record halls all over the world, but there are many more, including Lobsang Rampa's Cave of the Ancients and Radu Sinamar's Transylvanian Sunrise, as well as many other books. All of these books describe first-hand personal accounts of actually going down into these halls of records all over the world, but they all share very similar details that seem to corroborate one another. For instance, they all talk about forms of illumination, oftentimes with no visible source or power supply. These are lights that are essentially on for thousands of years, and when they open the chambers, they're still lit. These books describe tools and machines that were left behind in these chambers that could lead us to breakthrough discoveries in the fields of energy and medicine. They also describe records that are the original sources, essentially, for all the world's religious texts. We may find the original story of Atlantis, the Great Flood, Adam and Eve, or the Garden of Eden. The impact could be major, especially if similar records are found throughout the world and they say the exact same thing. If you consider the potential implications, you'll recognize that these artifacts really could be the key to an enlightened, sustainable world peace. We have to acknowledge at least the potential that these artifacts could lead us to the end of war. And I mean religious wars, psychological wars, economic and political wars. This could be the end of rule by deception. That's what the truth could offer us. And I believe the truth is in these chambers. That's what makes this discovery so important. It could be the key to world peace. With this context in place, it's time to return to Bill Brown's story at Giza and reveal the key discovery he made in the demolished village area that unlocks the entire puzzle.
Now this is going to be the start of the limits of the new excavation project that we call Michael's Tomb. Okay. That starts in this whole area right here. This, there and there, and you'll see how moist the ground is. That's where the tunnel is. And that's what we wanted to expose. They found 5 tombs. They raided 5 tombs here about 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And our project is to expose and find the 2 tombs that they didn't enter yet. We're going to actually start here with front-end loaders and come in with front-end loaders and remove all of this area down about 8 or 9 meters straight in with just heavy-duty equipment instead of having to use people with pick and shovels to haul everything away. And this tunnel, if you look at it and you get up a little bit higher, it goes straight into the southeast corner of the Great Pyramid. Why is the doorway, an arched doorway, so big into that building? What would the arch doorway be? And it was actually the entrance for heavy equipment to go down inside the tunnel that's here. The tunnel that's down here is huge, very, very big. And that's one of the things that we want to try and access. We wonder why this stuff wasn't here 2 months ago. Why are they bringing in and dumping stuff on here? Well, the answer is they know that we're going to do the excavation here, so it's money for them to take it away. And that's what they do. And that's been the problem in all of Giza, is they would go and take all of the sand and everything, and they bury all the tombs that are along here. But I have to say, there's hundreds of tombs along here. It's all been, the French, Italians, everybody, they've discovered all those tombs, but they're all covered now because they're part of the architectural record. But I think what we're thinking is that they may be the top of the tunnel. Yeah, we're going, and on the other side, it's all been removed. Why is this one still standing? You can walk right in this doorway and go down to the tunnel.
So Mark Lehner and Dr. Hawass are 2 of the only people that actually have the access required to do this kind of research. Lehner and Hawass were both in charge of what was called the Sphinx Mapping Project, which led to the Giza Plateau Mapping Project. But neither of these ended up disclosing any significant chambers discovered under the plateau or entrances to any tunnels. The Khufu Causeway is a road that leads directly from the Great Pyramid into the village area in the east. It's been buried for thousands of years, and only in 2023 was Mark Lehner's team able to uncover parts of it. But we know that it runs further east towards what he calls the Khufu Valley Temple. We visited Mark Lehner's excavation site in January of 2023, and we went back again in November, and it was very different. In January of 2023, this was just a pit with a few exposed blocks. When we came back in November, we saw an enormous section of the causeway uncovered. And we see the megalithic building style exactly the same as the Great Pyramid itself. We see a construction that clearly goes back to the original time when the Great Pyramid was built. Herodotus described this causeway as not only a road, but also underneath a tunnel. And he said that there were reliefs carved into the walls of this tunnel. So this as well could be a part of the Hall of Records. The reliefs carved in the walls in these tunnels could be a part of it. So this tunnel connects from the Great Pyramid itself all the way to the Valley Temple of Khufu down by the waterfront, and also the temple complex we found, which is at the border of the plateau and where the village has been until now. That section of the complex is extremely important, we believe, and it's one of the main areas we'd like to get access to. We know that we can get access to it without risking damage to any monuments nearby. Lehner is the head of the AERA, or the Ancient Egypt Research Associates, and they've released multiple reports showing images, maps, and diagrams of what they believe the Nile waterfront used to look like in the 4th dynasty. It shows the Khufu Causeway leading all the way east to what's called the Khufu Valley Temple, which is right on the waterfront. It also shows a basin coming immediately up in front of the Great Sphinx. Completely separate from the Khufu Valley Temple is what we've been calling the Khufu Palace, which is a royal palace complex we believe to be south of the Khufu Causeway in the area still covered by the village. We also believe that the temple complex on the edge of the plateau on the causeway itself is connected to the Khufu Palace. So everything connects to everything else underground, but there are essentially 3 major temple complexes for us to discover, which we already know the general location of.
All of that is in the history book, recorded for 20 or 30 years, according to Mark Lerner and Dr. Hawass. It's in their books, and they show, where it is. And I've known people that have gone down inside it. Hawass has been trying to do this for 25 years. So he finally got to knock down all of the buildings and make it into a huge, complex. And the plans show, when you look at the future plans, it shows the Khufu Open Air Museum. Okay, and it'll have some access as well. Maybe that you'll be able to go down into a couple of the rooms, which they've been doing for as long as I've been here. Everything is connected to the Khufu Pyramid. Mm-hmm. Everything, from every direction. And we know if you come from the Many House hotel complex, and you come from, I can guarantee you there's a doorway from the new museum. Okay, yes, it goes. Everything goes in there. This was Giza was like Rome. All roads lead to Rome. Well, here everything leads to Khufu Palace, and we have found evidence of the tunnels that has been exposed. Which shows that we have that information.
Connecting from the Khufu Palace.
Yeah, it goes directly to and we know where the entrances are inside the existing houses that are there. I know because I've been inside. I was inside in 2015 or 2014 or 15. Well, I can't remember when, but it's right after I returned, coming back to Egypt. They had found the underground tunnel complex when somebody was buried, was digging in their basement. And they actually brought me in, a big hole in there, and I actually went down where they actually found it. And when I went down the hole, I actually touched the stone with my hand, and the stone, the tunnel was still carrying the energy, and I could feel. I was sensing it, and I could feel, and it had a very interesting effect on me. This is the area where we want to do an archaeological excavation when I get my permit. And so this is very, very important, and we want to be able to get this whole area on this side of the building.
In recent years, Bill has collected a lot of data on this area around the so-called Khufu Causeway, including ground-penetrating radar scans from 2 key locations. In 2023, a friend of Bill's and supporter of this project wrote a letter to the Minister of Antiquities that included all the evidence we have on this area. And in response, he was informed that he is now banned from Egypt, meaning he can still visit as a tourist but can't do any work in the country. The GPR scans and their exact locations were officially disclosed to the world last year in an article published in Nexus magazine. They are in the public record, but today we're sharing much more information about the underground structure at this location. It is a risk to share all of this information, but we believe the whole world deserves to know about it.
When I came here this trip, we had notified for many years, at least minimum, the last thing is 2 years, the exact location. And this is the letter that Michael had sent to everybody. And so we gave them GPS coordinates, depth, GPR scans. And the location happened to be over on the corner of the concrete wall in the village where the houses have been demolished. And so that had been shown multiple places, and we'll show the location. Okay. No, my wife was always saying that this was the location and that we were just following her lead, and we talked to her daily to find out exactly what steps we were going to use.
We know that about halfway along the Sphinx Causeway is what's called the Osiris Shaft underground. And so we have to wonder if there's a similar complex about halfway along the Khufu Causeway or the Great Pyramid Causeway. To put it simply and safely, we have a friend that lives in the village who has given us a lot of information. And he told Bill a few years ago about an entire temple complex directly under the Khufu Causeway, right where the village meets the plateau. He said that he had worked extensively in these chambers, and so he was able to describe their dimensions to Bill. Using this and other corresponding sources, Bill was able to put together a very complete, accurate model of this entire temple complex, and that's what we're about to show you. This temple complex is completely unknown to the world and has never been publicly announced until now. It contains a corridor longer than a football field, lined with chambers on both sides, and from what we hear, most of these chambers are still sealed. Besides that, it also has a tunnel going directly west to the Great Pyramid that connects to the lower ramps discovered by Malanga and Biondi. How did you come to know about that temple?
Oh, okay. About 3 or 4 years ago, when we were researching a different area near the causeway, the Great Pyramid Causeway, I met an individual, an Egyptian, who had taken a private video movie of his own residence where he had been digging in his own basement. And so he showed that information to me, but only had a small detail of it. And he actually sent it to me through onto my cell phone, and I didn't find it for a couple of years later. And so this person kind of gave us a long description of his journey down into this area and what he had discovered. And so from that, we were able to make architect drawings and sketches of what he said, word by word, which was done through the work with Richard Gabriel at the time. And so we drew up some sketches, and from that we were able to, and you will see a video animation movie that actually highlights that whole drawing series, and is the program that we want to present to the Egyptians for a major discovery, major project in the future.
Okay, so other than this individual, do you know of anyone else who is aware of that temple, or anyone else he worked with, or was it just a very private operation?
It was a very private operation, and I only know of one person that talks about it, and so we've been working several years on trying to actually confirm it. When the raid came out, the 2019 raid came out of an area in the same area, we have since that time met a couple of people that were witness to access into that area, which kind of complemented what this other person had said about his own house. So there have been a couple of people that I'm not allowed to say their names, and they have given me some photographs and some images that they're using in their own book, so we're not allowed to publish them to the public.
Okay, so it's basically completely unknown to the world.
Yeah, it's completely 100% unknown to the world.
Yeah, so this is the first time anyone is really seeing anything about this temple, and not only that, but they're getting a very complete look at what the shape of it is, and which is based on eyewitness account from this person who is down in there.
Exactly. And the animation does a very good job of helping explaining, because it's all based on actual drawing dimensions and everything. So we did a lot of research to make it authentic.
When Bill first showed me this model, I was literally shaking and I had goosebumps. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because I knew instantly what this meant. I was one of maybe 4 or 5 people on Earth who had seen this temple, and I knew instantly that it connected directly to the lower ramps that were shown by Biondi and Malanga. All I had to do was find matching angles of the pyramid within both videos, pull them into Photoshop, and overlap them. That's it. The tunnel from the temple leads directly to the lower parts of the ramps in the Great Pyramid, and in turn leads straight up to the Holy of Holies, the secret chamber that we really want to see. The timing has been miraculous. It's like the pyramid has suddenly decided to open its own time capsule for us. We want to open this pathway for all of humanity. We want the doors of this innermost sanctum of the Great Pyramid to be revealed to the entire world. We want this discovery to be treated with the greatest of care. We want it to be honored, cherished, protected, and respected. It is the grand treasure of our planet. This temple is the true entrance to the Great Pyramid's secret chambers. As further proof that this temple complex is a reality, we actually have footage from the shaft leading to the first chamber that was taken when it was first covertly excavated.
I believe that the tomb of Khufu is not inside the Great Pyramid, but that there was another person associated with him that was alien technology, which we call his best friend. I call his best friend. And I believe that I believe they have already found it, but I believe that once it goes public, you're going to find that an alien mummy, I think, is the key to what we're going to really find. I think that's really all about. It's going to be the people who actually built the pyramids, not Khufu. So my response is that what they're going to discover is the builders of the pyramid that were ET type origin. that were working alongside the Egyptians at the time. So I think Khufu is buried outside the Great Pyramid. I think I know the location, and that's a different topic.
So you think Khufu is obviously 4th dynasty, but possibly we'll find things that are going back to the original, actual, like Casey says, 10,500 BC
Yes.
origins.
Yes.
And that
yes.
might be the alien.
Correct. They were definitely pre-Egyptian. They were not Egyptian. So we're going to find maybe the real, like I say, the origin of the builders of the pyramid pre-dynastic Egypt.
Okay, so you think we might actually find bodies, mummies of these some of these beings?
Yeah, my understanding there is 6 to 9 rooms inside.
Okay.
And I think the scan pyramid thing, shows a couple of the room areas, as well as down in front, underneath the front of the Great Pyramid, where the tunnel comes from our site. I think those are the original. I don't really want to use the word Atlantean because it turns too many people off, but pre-Egyptian time period, which was for me Atlantis.
Okay. Do you think there might be records or technology found together with these bodies in tombs or potentially chambers for that?
Yeah, the records, yes. Whether they can be decoded is going to be a different story. But yes, we're going to find records most definitely. And like I say, they could be the light code records of Thoth, etc. What the Emerald tablets talk about. That's like what I think we're going to find.
Yeah, you're familiar with the Emerald tablets of Thoth, and you know about that. You think that could be accurate, potentially, even a potentially a spaceship underneath?
Yeah, well, there is. In my personal opinion, there is, yes. And there are multiple ships there. I think once we get to the site and break through, according to the maps that I have, it shows the UFO site at that location. I think that's what we're going to find. Along with all the other information that I'm working on is the halls of record at the Sphinx area, which is working on exclusively now the project to work at the stable area. I'm trying to get the money right now to open the stable area. And that will lead, we know, to the Sphinx Hall of Records, which is completely different than the records inside the Great Pyramid. They're all connected, but it's a matter of, I think, different time period, it could be different culture.
What about those in the temple? There's a whole long string of corridors together. Do you have any idea of what might be in those rooms?
We believe that they were actually storage rooms for food and stuff. A lot of the they could be chambers with different various tombs, side by side. But if you go into the Valley of the Kings and you see a similar situation, with all of these rooms and everything, I think they're more storage rooms. But they could be the royal treasury. They could be, records. This is what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that these were, the day-to-day living of the time period in which they were built. I think it will show the records of that time period that we really need to know about. Well, the area is self-contained and totally protected because they have covered it up with a roadway over top of it. So nobody's going to actually dig there. So it is protected by the road that's actually covering it. And they are exposing the Khufu Causeway itself as a part of a major project, a UNESCO project. But as far as the actual location, but it is actually protected by a road that is covering it. So it's easy access once we get permission to be able to show it. And obviously, once we produce this film and make it real and give the location, that might open the door. That's the idea. I think they're fully aware that it's there and that it is being covered up literally. And to actually gain access to it is only to go public and to see what kind of a response the Egyptians will make, if any at all. And I have personally met with Mark Lerner. He knows that I know.
What would we need in order to get a permit for ourselves to work there?
Well, the Egyptian government is completely changing right now, and their philosophy is changing, which will allow the possibility of more projects. But as it stands right now, there are no projects at GIZA. The only project at GIZA is ongoing Japanese excavation. But other than that, there are no. And so the understanding that I have through sources is that they want to open it up over the next couple of years. So we're just trying to introduce the idea of what the project is and the importance of it, and then take it to the level of the right people, the government associates involved, etc., and see if they'll do it.
Potentially because of these Great Pyramid scans and North Face Corridor being discovered. Do you think that Giza is being even more locked down than it usually has been?
More so, and it will continue to be locked down even more as more information becomes available. The issue that we have here is everything's about tourism, and they have now initiated a new program now in which you can anyone in the general public can pay for private entry into private areas. And that's basically what this is all about. They want to keep these areas private because it's a very good high source of income for whether it's the government doing it or the tourist companies doing it. It's still private and it costs a lot of money. And that's what it's all about. And so that's why they want to keep it closed. The families that are involved with this go back generations upon generations, and it's not. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. It's a way of money, raising money, and we're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about thousands of dollars. And so the black market is all over the world, and so it's not any different here at Egypt, and that's not going to change. In my personal opinion, I was hoping that we could influence some people, and I actually talked to some people that I knew that were doing some of these type activities, and their basic answer was, "We don't care. We don't care about our history. We only want the money." And once I got to that point, it was kind of like, nothing's going to change. They just want the money.
Well, I know like some of the tunnels around the Sphinx, for example, it's like you say, they will keep them hidden because they'll charge tourists an extreme amount of money just to show them. Do you think there's any beyond that? Do you think there's anything being covered up for reasons other than those private tours that can make them money? As in, is there potentially some spaces that keep hidden because they could actually affect the worldview of humanity religiously or scientifically?
Well, Well, religiously and scientifically, they would definitely affect everything, and that's why they won't allow it to happen. Now, the only thing that we can do is go in and expose what information we have with an understanding that it may not change anything other than, exposure, and it doesn't mean anything. And I can go on personally on record that the people are saying that, we know that you know, but you can't do anything about it. Period. And so it's like, who do we share this information to? What difference will it make?
Yeah, so when I first heard they were going to be tearing this whole village down, I thought, the Egyptians would be doing their own excavations in all this area because
That's
that would be the silver lining of losing this whole village, displacing all these homes.
And the last time I was here, I negotiated to be everything would be done under an Egyptian flag, and that I would my name is a part of the people on the team doing the work, and that's been agreed on. The word that we got was we have to wait one more year. And now that we're here, we understand why we have to wait another year. Because of all the activities that are going on underground, they need another year to rob everything. I mean, they're digging and robbing and taking everything. And so they needed another year. And so all the mafia families saying, no, you can't do anything.
I have many maps and diagrams from William, and I've used these all to compile a complete map of the underground tunnels we know of. Some of these are confirmed and exact where they're shown, and others are inferred or approximate. We have to recognize this is only the top layer of tunnels, and the further down we go, from what we hear, the tunnels get bigger and bigger, and what's inside them gets more and more unbelievable. We're actually aware of many additional tunnels and chambers which we could add to this map, but these will be explained in future films.
One of the reasons why I'm here on these latest trips is confirmation of an underground tunnel system, which we have confirmed. Not only have we confirmed, we have the movies, and we're accessing some of them, but be careful how you release that information.
Mm-hmm. We have many films that were entrusted to us from our friends in the village that show tunnels the world has never seen before, several of which we've confirmed to be at Giza. We've also seen many artifacts that have been discovered in these locations. These artifacts bring a whole host of other questions in themselves, and sadly they'll all end up disappearing into the black market, since those who find them can't bring them to a museum or disclose the true place of their origin. One very curious piece, for example, shows what appears to be a double helix of DNA, and on its opposing side, what's called a magic square, where each symbol is included in each vertical and horizontal line. These symbols are unknown to the best of my knowledge, but they may be an example of one of the world's first written languages. They may be somewhat related to the Dispilio tablet and its cryptic symbols that have never been deciphered, or even to early rune systems or proto-languages of Eastern Europe. Essentially, we found many anomalies at Giza that need further study and careful excavation, but there are two sites where we'd like to work initially. One is Bill's own horse stable property, where we know there are underground structures and tunnels that very likely lead into the Sphinx's Hall of Records, and the other is the Causeway Temple site, which very likely leads directly to the Great Pyramid's Hall of Records. These are two of the most important discoveries on Earth, and we know that we can access them without any possible risk to the pyramid or Sphinx. In fact, we would only have to dig through piles of broken building debris, and even then we wouldn't have to dig far since we know exactly where these structures are. We've provided ample evidence of their existence, and of the fact that sites like these have never been treated in a proper way, and are at risk of being lost and covered up. We can't say exactly what will be found in these very important locations, but all indications point to artifacts of extreme significance to the whole human race. Casey himself indicated that the entire purpose of these records is to bring harmony and peace to humanity and to give us valuable insights on our connection with the natural universe. It's meant to help humanity evolve towards a more enlightened state. He said, "Let's don't forget the thesis or the key for which all of this understanding had come, that there might be a closer relationship of man to the Creator and of man to man." So this is not merely an educational film series. It is meant to educate and raise awareness of the importance of this issue, but it's also a call to action and the public announcement of an active project to recover this treasure for the benefit of all. We need awareness and support from the whole world in order to make this project happen. We ask that if you can't contribute financially to this effort, at least help us spread the message. Please share this film everywhere you can to help it reach the widest audience possible. Parts 1 and 2 of this series have already faced considerable opposition and shadow banning from various platforms, and we can't pay for mass promotions, so we rely on grassroots efforts to help us share this information. If we can get the required attention and support, we could be excavating to the halls of records in 2025. We could be reclaiming our collective heritage as the human race and broadcasting this exciting discovery in real time. There's much more to this story, but the content and timing of future episodes in this series will be dependent on the level of support we receive. So we hope that the whole world can recognize the importance of this project. This is all a riddle laid out by a Golden Age civilization. It's a coded message that offers a pathway to a bounty of lost wisdom to anyone who can solve the riddle. It's a time capsule that's designed to be opened only when humanity is mature enough, intellectually and spiritually, to find the answer and be worthy of the power of its contents. The problem is that so few people have any knowledge of these subjects, and it seems that humanity has generally failed to acknowledge the importance of the GIZA halls of records. The purpose of this film is to awaken the world to the reality of an extremely important situation and a sequence of events that's unfolding quickly at the pyramids. At the right time, these chambers will be opened, and I think that time is now.
Right. Well, this is a big year, especially for the Great Pyramid, and this is
Yeah.
2023. They
It's
just
history.
found the North Face corridor into the
Yeah.
pyramid, and
Yeah.
all these new scans are coming out.
Yeah.
So,
So that's what it's all about, and we're a part of all of that.
Mhm.
And in the years to come, and you look back on it, we'll see what this recording was recording at the time.
right, we're right at the threshold here because we want to make sure the wrong people aren't going and raiding these places and everything's going to the black market. And
Well,
You never
I'm
know.
not sure we can stop that, but it's kind of like it will be what it will be.
Mhm.
Okay. We know that the tunnels exist. We know the tombs exist. We know people are in it. We know of people that are in it right now, and we've seen evidence that they have removed. So you can imagine what everybody else is doing. We're here, and we're doing it, and I hope that you get to see the results of it at some point.
Mhm.
Okay.